And welcome to DEPS, the Deployment Education Program for Spouses. I am an Air Force spouse, so this program is mainly for Air Force spouses. However, if you're a spouse of another branch of service, congratulations to you for taking on your spouse and everything that goes with them. Hopefully this information is for you also, although the alphabet may change. We know the military just loves their alphabet, don't they? I'm Emily Houck. I'm the wife of Sergeant Rob Houck of the United States Air Force, and I originally developed this briefing for the spouses in the 427th Reconnaissance Squadron. And we've also opened it up to other squadrons, and we are on the MC-12 reconnaissance plane platform. It's been almost 18 years of things that I wish someone had told me, plus some things that other spouses have provided that they wish they'd known. And as it says in the bottom of the slide, I didn't reinvent this wheel. I know that there's other agencies on bases and posts that have similar programs, but I'm hoping that I put enough of it in one spot for you to make it more convenient. I'm not a professional. This thing is not full of fireworks, fancy sound effects, and animations. I'm sorry. It's just a generalized version of the briefing I give, which is more specified to our platform. I've tried to give credit where credit is due, and if I didn't, I apologize to whomever created it. All the humor and the puns are mine. Sorry for you. So, I am a key spouse. Well, what is that, do you ask? Well, a key spouse is the liaison between the commander and the spouses. Basically, if you're a spouse, you have something you need or you've heard something, I'm able to go to the commander and say, hey, I have this spouse. What can I tell them? Oops, I apologize for that. We're also a great resource when you need help locating services, especially when you're brand new. We're one of the first faces that you'll hopefully hear from or see, and we are really excited to have you, and we are wanting to get you hooked up with some good resources. We are not, however, your babysitter, your dog sitter, your fundraiser, or anything of that nature. That's not our job. So, the main thing we want to tell you is that you are not alone. Please, please, please keep your cape in that drawer. Julie Negron is an Air Force wife, and she just felt compelled and just driven and loves drawing these cartoons. And so you'll see many of her cartoons featured in here. And as you can see from this one, she's able to beat back deployment disasters with her spatula of steel. And we'll talk about some things that might happen a little later. So the first thing is, do you know the name of your spouse's commander? Do you even know what squadron your spouse belongs to, or unit, or ship? Do you know the location and phone number of your squadron or ship or what have you office? And if you're Air Force, do you know the name and number of your spouse's first sergeant? Well, what's a first sergeant, you ask? Well, they're kind of like the military key spouse. They are in the know of everything that goes on in the squadron. If you need help, that's who you go to if your spouse is gone. If you need to know where to take your car, that's a good person to ask. Best person to ask is your key spouse. So what is a DEPS binder? In the briefings I give, I actually furnish these binders, which are nicely and wonderfully put together by the airmen and lieutenants of the squadron. And it's about a 1.5 to 2 inch binder, and it's full of tabs and printouts of things from the briefing that you might need. I would highly suggest you get a binder or notebook or something and put everything there. And then that way you have a one-stop shop for everything. Well, what should be in there? Well, the resources. We'll talk about a few of them today. There might be some that you find. A checklist. I give one to the spouses in the briefings, but it's not really hard to make one, especially if you take notes during this briefing. And then that way you can sit down with your spouse before they leave. Things you should know. Just the main points of this briefing, and make sure that you ask your spouse. You can divide it into different sections, such as legal, medical, housing, benefits, family. Please make sure you get plenty of copies of orders, especially if you want to take advantage of benefits offered on bases and posts. They usually require a copy of the orders. And then a list of all your key spouses with contact info so you know who to call if something happens. Are you afraid you're going to miss something? Well, it's okay. The advantage you have over a briefing is that you can start and stop this video at any time, because I know I am not the most wonderful, motivated speaker. But hopefully, you'll learn something. Whether it's your first deployment or your 10th or your 100th, it's always hard because they all present different challenges because they usually come at different times in your life. and you usually can't tell people where they're going or for how long. Apologize for the pauses. I'm trying to sip on some water. The service flag. You've seen this in car windows, kitchen windows, hanging, and you're wondering what kind of country that is that has such a strange flag that so closely resembles the American flag. Well, it's called the service flag, and it came about in World War II, and as a history teacher, I was always up on the history of things. But you can look for Blue Star Moms, Blue Star Wives, and find the description. The number of stars indicates how many people are currently overseas serving in a war. This person has one person over. There could be 2 stars, 4 stars, just however many you have serving in the war. Sometimes you'll see them gold with a little bit of blue trim around them, and those are gold stars, and that means unfortunately that person did not make it home. And that's where you hear about gold star wives and moms. You're going to go through a lot of emotions, and they're probably all normal. You're not losing your mind. And of course I couldn't resist Mr. Spock since I'm a huge nerd. We all know that he doesn't really have emotions. The 5 stages that I'll use, military.com, is the pre-deployment, which is before they leave. The deployment, the first month when they actually leave. Sustainment is the time in between they leave and when they come back. Pre-reintegration, which is the fancy term for they're coming back home. And then the actual reintegration, which is when they get back home up to 6 months after. Let's talk about each one a little bit. Pre-deployment. Before they leave, you kind of anticipate they're leaving, but you're really hoping that they don't go. Somebody might get sick and they're needed here. They may decide they're not needed. Uncle Guido and his boys might come along and take care of it. No, I'm just kidding. They can't do that. But something else you have to realize, especially if they're going to a different platform, and every time I say platform, I mean maybe going from fighter jets to cargo planes or whatever, is that they may have to do some training. So, yes, they may be gone 6 months, but it could be 9 after training. So you really need to make sure you get your affairs in order. But you're going to find yourself distancing yourself a little bit because you know they're leaving. And part of you wishes they just hurry up and get out the door because it's so stressful. And that leads to arguments. You know, why can't they ever pick up their socks? Would they hurry up and leave so you don't have to worry about their socks on the floor anymore? Oh my goodness, the deployment. They're finally gone. Oh, wow, you are so relieved. You drop them off. You know, a little bit of tears. You get home. You walk in the door. You set down your purse, your bag, whatever. And you just feel a little disoriented. It's all on you now. You're overwhelmed. Can you make the right decisions? You feel a bit alone and sad and alone. Is anybody else going through this? You have some sleep difficulty and security issues. This is where some wives get the big dogs, the fancy systems, sleep with a bat under the bedside table. Or you could be like me, and I did all 3 at various times. Sustainment. You finally have your new routines. You have your sources of support. You feel more in control and independent, and you can do this. You are making your own decisions. Is it wonderful? Is everything acting in harmony? Maybe not, but you're coping. You are resilient. What does resiliency mean? It means you're able to bounce back. You have that inner core of strength that you did not know you have. And I believe you have it. You have to believe you have it. About a month before they come back, you're so happy, you're excited, and at the same time you're apprehensive, have some problems making decisions, even though you've been making them because, you know, they're coming home. Is this something they would have decided to do? And then if you've ever been pregnant, you get that burst of energy like, oh my Lord, I have to clean this house. They're going to think I just haven't been keeping this house the whole time. You got to go hide all the McDonald's wrappers where you've been eating out every night because you know the kids would totally rat you out. I'm just kidding. But you really do feel like you have to clean some things, and that's totally normal. So they're back. You've picked them up from the airport. You've made your signs. Everything's happy. You go through a little bit of a honeymoon period, and we'll talk more about this. I have a whole separate section for this part. At the same time, you're going to lose your independence a little bit, so you really need to keep your own space. Hopefully you've developed a hobby or a new routine with a friend. Reiterating, renegotiating some routines with family. You know, mom or dad's home now, so things have to be a little bit different. So if you feel like you're going crazy, you might be just a little bit, but it's perfectly normal. And that's what we're here for. Now, if you find you're crying every single day, that might be something that needs to be addressed. So what do you need to know about legal issues? This is always the hardest part of the module because, well, I try to bribe somebody else to do this part for me. It's a little bit more involved. I have most of the information on the slides, so hopefully we can get through this part together. The Military Spouse Residency Relief Act really was a relief. Why? Well, let's talk about residency. It used to be, back in the before times in olden days, when you moved, you had to become a new resident of that state wherever you moved to. Now, however, you don't have to do that. You can keep your state residency. Now, there's always the few exceptions to the rules. If you need to get a job, some employers require that you become a resident of the state, and some states you have to actually reside there and show up there to keep your residency. And you'll have to look up your state permits on that one. Same goes for taxes. You really just need to check with your tax preparer. If you don't have one, base agencies and post agencies usually have someone you can call. And again, that would be a good time to call your key spouse for sergeant and find out who that might be. Now look at my note at the bottom. A military spouse is no longer required to become a state's resident upon moving, but you usually have 3 vehicle documents: your registration, your insurance, and your driver's license. 2 of those 3 must match. You can't have one from California, one from Texas, one from Tennessee. They will not accept that. As for voting, you can usually vote in your spouse's state of residence or where you currently reside if you're there due to orders. And again, you would just need to check with your state residence. Pause and let you read a little bit. So, make sure that your spouse leaves you what is called a special power of attorney. Again, back in the before times in olden days, a general power of attorney would get you whatever you needed to do. But now, and especially on bases and posts, you have to have special powers of attorney which specify exact actions, such as John or Jane Doe has my permission to register the car, to make appointments, to change things at finance. So, as you can see, it's a specialized power of attorney. Next, in the location of your spouse's will, it's usually mandatory that they update it, especially if you have kids. Make sure your military ID is updated before they leave. You can do it while they're gone. You just need a piece of paper usually. Make sure they update their VRED. I bet you didn't even know they had one of those. It's the virtual record of emergency data. And if something unfortunately happens to your spouse, this is what they look at to know who to notify, where to send belongings, and that sort of thing. It says see binder insert, but of course you don't have the binder, so I apologize. I just forgot to remove that from the slide. Make sure the military member's insurance is updated for all of you. Know who to contact for base legal, and they usually know more than you do about which powers of attorneys you'll need and how to do wills. And something somebody told me, and I'll put it on here, is if you or family members will be traveling out of country, make sure you or they have special powers of attorney to take the kids. So let's talk about automobiles. Usually, if you're a non-resident member of a state, you can get a special form and you will get a military discount, and it's usually a good one. So please make sure, if you're not a resident of that state, that you go to the DMV and ask them if you would qualify. Now, if you need to register or sell your car, make sure that you get that special power of attorney that we talked about earlier. And then something that's also important to know is know where to go if something happens to your car. Because if it breaks down, do you know where to go? Do you know where to take it? If it needs a smog, do you know where to go for that? And if you speak a different language, some DMVs have different language tests available. Not all DMVs, so you may have to call around a little bit. So what do you need to know about your family life? Let's talk about how to deal with, whether you're single, whether you have kids. And as this cartoon shows you, it's not a matter of what happens if something happens, but when it happens. Hopefully it's not more than just having to change a light bulb. Let's talk about children. Some of you may be saying, well, I don't have children. But you might know someone who does, so this might be good information for them too. Or it might be good information maybe if you have to babysit. So some deployment benefits for children. It increases their independence. It strengthens the relationship with the parent left back at home. You can plan and do some goals together. Maybe some reevaluation of the rules. You might push that bedtime back just a little bit, but not too much. Let them mail cards and letters. I know that in today's world it's mostly emails and Skype, but it's not anyway as good as getting that actual letter to hold for the guys and gals overseas. And it's good to let the children figure out about where mom or dad are in the world. So what about for you and your family? Well, number one, please take care of yourself. You won't do anyone any good if you are so tired, so stressed out, just run ragged. And that goes into number two, be a good role model. You're going to cry, but if it's every day, that's a little much. And children really go off of whatever you're feeling. If you notice you're stressed, your children seem to be getting to you a little more, it's because they feel you're stressed. They're going to express their feelings. Please let them. Don't tell them to shut up and whatever. Let them talk to you. Before your spouse leaves, it's good to sit down and let them go over what they expect from your child. Kind of number 6 ties into that. Let them know that little Johnny, little Susie have to do their schoolwork. They can't go up to the teacher and say, gee, I'm sorry I didn't get it done. My mom or dad's deployed. No, that doesn't fly. Let them help with the preparation and the packing. Please, number 8, be patriotic. I know you're angry, probably, that your spouse has to go. You really didn't think they would have to go. However, this is what they signed up for. And hopefully it's only the one time. It might not be. But please don't walk around saying, I hate America. I hate everything American. If only, if only, if only. It's not going to happen. Be supportive. Be supportive of their decisions. Get help if you need it. Again, put that cape in the drawer. You're not here to do this alone. And before your spouse comes home, mainly for the guys, have them take a picture of themselves, especially if you have little ones, because they come back looking a little different. If they're like my husband, they come home with this growth on their face, and they call it the deployment stash, and sometimes it gets really woolly, and it could scare the little ones, let me tell you. Well, what if you're expecting? This is always a hard subject to talk about. Even if you're not pregnant, you might have a friend who is, so this is good for them to know. If you are pregnant or having a child before, during, or after, it is hard. Did I go through that? No, I was lucky, but I've known many spouses who have had to deal with this, and it's very, very hard on both spouses. So please be sensitive to that if you have friends who are pregnant and might deliver before, during, or after. Talk about your feelings between each other. You're both scared. It's okay to be scared. Send pictures of your pregnant self to your spouse. They don't get to do a whole lot for entertainment, and they really want to know what's going on with you. Write journals, send them emails, send them pictures of the baby, moving around or sonograms. Share books, articles. If your spouse sends you 5 billion articles, at least pretend to read them because they're just trying to help. Have a support system, please, for your pregnancy. I wish you the best in your pregnancy, but not everything goes according to plan, and you need to have someone who could be there either emotionally, physically supportive. Find out about using the American Red Cross for notification. We'll actually talk about that in just a little bit. Make a birth plan. Usually your doctor has you do this anyways. Is it going to go according to the plan? Probably not. Probably so. But the best you can do is prepare. And after the baby's born, please have someone to help you. It's okay to ask for help. A lot of us don't like to ask for help, but you really need it because you are going to be worn out. So for children of all ages, it used to be children 0 to 17, I think is what I had on here, but please remember, number one, routine is important, especially for the extreme littles. Those little bitty girls and guys, they don't really understand that mom or dad's gone. They're more self-centric. But you really need that routine, even if it's hard, even if you're tired, even if you're having a bad day. Let them keep that routine. Make arrangements for childcare. You're single parenting it now, so you have to make arrangements because things happen. You pick up a nail in your tire, you're going to be late for pickup. Have arrangements. Number 3, please, I could not bold this one enough. Have a backup child care plan for emergencies. Nobody hardly ever gets sick during the day. It's usually in the middle of the night. And you need someone to go watch your other child. Or, in my case, it could be you. I had kidney stones at 3 in the morning, and I had 2 little children. Luckily, I was blessed to have some neighbors that could help me out. Notify your teachers of your children that there's a deployment coming up so that little Johnny, little Susie, when they're losing their mind in class, the teacher at least knows why. If you have teenagers especially, please go over with them what I will cover with you later about social media, because Lord knows they post everything, and I mean everything. Have a plan of what you can do, some activities or goals that they can look forward to during the deployment. They have recordable storybooks now that the children can record things, or vice versa with your spouse. There's going to be tantrums because they are going to test you like you had never thought they could test you before. And then teenagers, they look older, but they're really still little kids inside. They won't ever tell you that, but they really need reassuring too. And they also like routine, believe it or not. So let's talk about a few of the benefits that you might be able to get. If you're Air Force, you have what's called the Airmen and Family Readiness Center. And some examples of programs that I've seen at different bases are morale calls. Those are actual phone calls you can make, military. Give parents a break, which is child care, a little bit of time a month. Car care, because we care, that's usually a free oil change. Keeping families in touch, that's again helping, with brochures and things. Hearts Apart dinner, not every base has this, but it's basically a free dinner for you, free child care, and you can just go talk to other deployed spouses. HeartLink spouse orientation, I wish they'd had this when I came in. This is for spouses basically new to the Air Force. Returning home care, that's child care for when your spouse is returning. Free computer use, yes, most of us have computers. Sometimes they don't work and you need to use the computer. And that leads into in-home deployed computer support for when there's something wrong with your computer. Now the last thing I have on here is the Military and Family Life Consultant Program. The NFLAC is what it's called. And I don't think every base has this, but it's off the record master's or doctorate degree counselors who are here to help. And this goes along the lines of you're not in it alone and you're going to need someone to talk to. And you don't always have a friend available. And they have different programs, usually through the AFRC, the Airmen and Family Readiness. So that'd be a good one to call. Or call your key spouse. We'll find it for you. Let's talk about those packages that your spouse wants to send full of cookies, candies, and what nots that they want. This is old school form. I think this is for heavier packages. And it's like stereo instructions from the 80s trying to fill these things out. So this is a good slide to remember it and come back to. This shows you how to fill it out. And the main things to remember, no matter what you send, is not to put rank. Do not put rank on your packages or your letters. Do not put the country. And do not include things considered contraband, especially if you're sending to Afghanistan or Muslim or Islam countries. Luckily, there's a new form out. It's this tiny little guy, much easier to fill out, same information. And the instructions are on that. However, there's many YouTube videos, I believe, that show you how to fill these out. Something you can call and get, it's not available online from the post office, is a military kit. You call the number here and request the military kit, and it changes, but the last time I ordered, this is what was in it. And it's all free. And then that way you don't have to worry about going to the post office and stocking up. Space aid travel. This is travel on military planes, and it's not from every base, so you have to check into it. If your military member is going to be gone 120 plus days, you are entitled to use this, such as we have spouses and families in our squadron who are from other countries, and they use this to get back and forth home. It's at a much cheaper rate. The downside is you cannot make reservations. It's first come, first serve on available flights. talk about the money, honey. So, before your spouse leaves, especially if they were the ones who paid the bills, make sure that you know the location of your financial accounts for checking, savings, credit cards. Make sure you have everything you need to pay those bills, such as a list of the actual bills when they're due, checks, stamps, envelopes, and especially the online website addresses and passwords. Your spouse is going to be gone during tax season. Make sure you know how you're going to prepare your taxes for the year and what documents you'll need, because you'll need to wait until you get all those before you take it in. And a lot of bases have free tax help. Something that a lot of people don't know is if you call your creditors, sometimes they give you a break during the deployment. I think Harley Davidson, if you have a Harley Davidson, lowers your interest rate for the time of deployment. And the last one, please make sure you can sign on and look at the leave and earning statements, your spouse's account statements. I don't know how else to explain those. Most people know what an LES is. Oh, look, something bright and yellow just popped up on the screen. What does it say? Please remember, it's only temporary. This is not the lottery. The money is only temporary. So what should you know about your housing? Know the location of your rent agreement or deed. Know how much your rent is, or your mortgage if you own it. Know, please, who to call if something breaks. If you're on base, there's usually base maintenance. If you're off base, call the landlord or the agency. If you own your home, hopefully you have a home service warranty that you can call. If you're in one of those earthquake-prone or hurricane-prone states, make sure you know how to shut off your utilities. There's usually 2 or 3 for water, 1 for gas, 1 for electricity. Get out and meet your neighbors. They're really good to know if you have an emergency or if you just need a little help. If you're going to be gone more than 30 days, do your squadron and your key spouses a favor and just leave that information with them in case they need to contact you for any reason. And if you're waiting on base housing, make sure your spouse notifies the base housing office that they're deploying so that you don't lose your spot if you're on a wait list. So what should you know about medical care? Most of the calls that I get are because they're sick, or there's a sickness, or urgent care. What do they do? Well, first and foremost, make sure you're in DEERS, Defense Enrollment Eligibility Reporting System. That's what every military service checks. Know where to find your family's records. Most of it's all computerized now, so it's not as big a deal as it used to be. Make sure you know who your primary care manager is. Make sure you know how to call TRICARE and which one you're in. If you're going to leave the area that you're in for more than 30 days, usually you have to change your region. And number 1, even though it's number 5 on here, make sure you know who to call if you get sick, especially in the middle of the night. Who do you call when you get sick, especially in the middle of the night? It's usually best to just go ahead and call TRICARE or United Health West, whoever they are now. Or call your PCM. Usually your PCM has an emergency after-hours number or an after-hours nurse that can help refer you. Now, if you're really sick or severely injured, go to the ER. Don't pass go. Don't collect $200. Just go. And then you'll need to call the insurance within 24 hours. For immediate family only, which is your spouse, your children, or your parents. This is not grandparents, not aunts, uncles, cousins. But for the specify immediately family, and no, I have no idea why I keep saying immediately, if there is a birth, a death, or a serious illness, you can call the Red Cross, and they will help get you in touch with your spouse overseas. And the number is on your screen. What else should you have in your binder? You really need at least most of these personal documents. Like I said, your binder is to be your one-stop shop. Your one-stop for if you have any questions or you need anything or anything comes up, you know right where to go. And so a lot of these things you can just have copies. And again, this is another slide that I would bookmark and just keep in mind. So let's get to the fun part of the briefing, the one that takes usually the longest. I'll let you enjoy the cartoons that you probably recognize here while I take a drink. And it really is water. Okay. Social media. How to avoid the rumor mill. You've seen it. One friend calls another, oh, I heard this happened. What about it? Oh, I heard, what's one recently? There's protesters at the gate. Well, are they armed? I don't know, but probably. Let's talk about where you can go to get the information. You can go to the actual website of the Air Force Base. You can call the security desk. You can call public affairs. Check out the newspapers, base marquees. There's usually a big box if you're on base, big box voice. Key spouses are the best person to call if you have one, because we usually know from the commander or the command post what's going on if there's a situation. Please find out from official sources before you make phone calls. And if somebody calls you, please refer them to this place, because the worst thing that can happen is the rumor mill gets started, and then there's just chaos. These slides I obtained from the Bill Air Force Base Public Affairs Office. I'm giving them total credit. I know they're kind of hard to read. Just take a moment to read them to yourself. Your spouse might send you photos. Please don't share them. You're going to be tempted, especially to mom, dad, or in-laws. Do not share these photos that they send you. They shouldn't be sending you photos, but we all know what happens. They're not releasable because they're not official. They haven't been cleared. Once they get back home, it's probably okay. Every time Facebook updates, you usually have to go back in and reset your settings. I know it's a pain, but please do that, because some things you post you don't want everybody seeing. Make sure that if you join any Facebook pages that might be your base organization, make sure they're the official pages. There's a lot of knockoff pages that spouses start for whatever reason. And remember that the main part of this module is not to scare you, but it's to scare you. This is not a movie. This is not a video game. This is real, and your spouse is in real danger where they are. Now, the level of danger depends on their job, but you don't need to make that any harder by putting information out there that the enemies can use. And they employ private hackers, and they just really want to find you, because our men and women have been trained. They know not to post. They go to survival training. But if the enemy wants to get at them, they're going to come at you, because we are the weak spots. Try not to post where you're going to be. I'm going to be at the park at 2 o'clock with the children. Come meet me. No, because that just gives more information than anybody really needs. And then this is all called OPSEC, Operational Security. So you'll hear OPSEC a lot if you don't already. And I think you've had time to read the slide. I was kind of giving you time there. So let's look at some examples that the Public Affairs Office has put together. A lot of times I have to contact spouses because they get so excited and they post things, and I'm excited for them. However, it's things that don't need to be out. You see examples of travel itineraries, where they're going, when they're coming back. Don't post anything specific. This is the section where in-laws and parents are going to just hate you. They're going to hate you, and this is the hardest part, especially when the person's coming back. They want to be there. They want to see their baby. Unfortunately, you can't tell them. Can you tell them face-to-face? Absolutely. Face-to-face. But if you're like most military spouses, you don't live anywhere near your family. So that's a little hard. So apologize, but let them know that it's for their baby's safety. It is for their safety. We've had deployments coming back that had to be delayed because somebody leaked the date and time. And you don't want that. That's a lot of anger that goes on. If your spouse tells you anything about missions, don't put it out there. If they tell you how many people they helped kill, how many people got hit today, how many people they shot, do not release that information. If your spouse is telling you things that are making you uncomfortable, feel free to tell them that that is just not something you want to hear, and you're sorry. You want them to share with you because they need to share sometimes. But there's some things that you don't want to know, and you probably don't need to know. Is anything that you post acceptable in a court of law? Yes. Look at number 8. You can have to give up your passwords and websites if they find out you've been leaking information. Number 9. This is always a favorite of mine. If you're approached by news media about information, please refer them to the Public Affairs Office or someone higher up than you. Excuse me. Usually they're trying to get a good story, like a good coming home story. You don't usually get to know that somebody's coming home till maybe the day or two before. But if you know before that and you leak it, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So just, if somebody from the newspaper, television, online approaches you, just tell them, I'm sorry, I can't answer that for you right now. Call this person. Let's talk about communication because that's another question I get asked a lot. Usually email is your communication. You email it back and forth. You can chat. There's online chatting. I know Google has one. You have FaceTime, Skype, of course. The internet is not always the best, especially if they're out on a ship or something. Sometimes run by private parties. There is no upkeep. The enemy really likes to cut those lines sometimes. And it's not always stable. Plus, your spouse might have a roommate, so it's not easy for them to talk. All that being said, email is your best bet, so that when you actually do get to talk to your spouse, you can keep it positive. And it's so hard. You want them to know that you're having a hard time here too sometimes. But try to be as positive as you can. Otherwise, they might start finding reasons not to call you, because they're dealing with enough out there. If you don't hear from your spouse for a few days, please don't panic. Things happen. I know that in today's world, we want it now. We want to talk to our person now. But it's not always possible because of enemy movement, or they may take a field trip. And it's just not always possible to talk to your spouse. But don't panic. If something is going on, your key spouse will let you know. Again, that goes back to the rumor mill. So the fun part, and almost to the end, I promise, reintegration. This is a picture that was posted on Facebook, and I just had to use it. I really don't know who the original owner is. I see the copyright there, so hopefully that's good enough. This is Amanda Bynes, if you don't know who this is. This is so true. So let's talk about what's going to be your new normal, because when they come back, it's not ever going to be like it was. Again, no matter if it's your first deployment, 7th, 100th. So what do you get to do? Well, they have something called Op Love. It's where the photographer volunteers time, and they can come photograph that reunion or the going away or the during deployment kind of pictures. Usually you have to use vague dates because, again, you can't tell people when they're coming home. You can give a month usually. Completely volunteer, so please be nice to them if they agree to do this for you. You can make a sign, have decorations. Please don't put them up outside until the day or so before they arrive. You can wear something special. We'll talk about that in just a second. And then some airports will allow you to actually wait at the gate. You get a special boarding pass at the airline counter. You usually have to have a copy of those orders. So again, this is something, and I try to give credit there with the website address of what not to wear. I would actually go to the website because they have pictures. Don't dress like you're going clubbing. Don't wear extremely high heels. Don't wear anything that you are not going to be comfortable in for probably a few hours because sometimes flights get delayed. You may have to chase kids, nurse kids, or just plain wait. Don't wear something you wouldn't want his commanding officer to see, or his wife. Don't wear a prom dress. Don't wear a wedding dress. Don't wear visible lingerie. In case he wants to pick you up, twirl you around, please make sure that you're wearing undergarments. And don't wear the slutty Halloween version of your spouse's uniform. We've all seen them. Enough said on that one. Now, back at the beginning of the briefing, we talked about your stage of emotion, so remember the one for reintegration. Again, you're going to be like, oh, honeymoon period, he's coming home, yay! So let's go on and talk about the coming home, the new normal. Your spouse has returned, hooray, what happens next? Angels are singing. Well, they'll probably have to go to work the next day. What? Yeah, they probably have to go to work the next day. They have to get debriefed. But then after that, most squadrons and posts will allow some comp time for them. And the days depend on what it is. Usually they have to stay in the area. So what should you expect for your new normal, life after homecoming? Your spouse is going to be tired. And I mean tired, bone tired, dragging in the door tired. You're going to be happy, especially if you just have little ones or just had a little child. You're going to be like, honey's home, here you go, I'm out the door. No, I'm just kidding. You need to give them time to adjust. I highly recommend you do not schedule trips because you never know what the schedule is going to be like when they get home. And they're pretty much going to come home, go to sleep, wake up, maybe eat some soup, go back to sleep. They've just traveled time zones and days, and you need to give them time. I know you want them to get right back into it, especially because you've been a single parent for so long. But you have to give it just a little bit more time. If you have the little ones, hopefully they've taken pictures, your spouse, along the way so that they're not too scared of when dad comes home or mom. There's going to be more testing of the rules by the older kids. And then the last one, I will do the steepling of the hands. Be understanding that your spouse has probably seen some things that they might or might not want to talk about. And it's things that you haven't had to deal with, things that is very hard. Don't push them to talk. They'll talk when they're ready to talk, or they might not ever tell you what's been happening. And as much as you want to share, especially marriage, give them this time and let them have it. Just give them the time. So when is the new normal not normal? When there's hopelessness, when they don't seem as interested in activities. Now again, this is months after maybe. Because in the beginning they're going to be like this anyways. Nobody comes back unchanged. Nobody is not affected. If there's a lack of energy, if they start to lose weight or really gain weight, if they can't seem to sleep, and again, this is a month or two after they return. If they start being late to work, just don't feel like it. If you've ever seen the movie Office Space, he just doesn't feel like going to work. Anxiety. If you're in the store and they're wandering up and down the aisles looking for enemies, because that's what they were trained to do, or they're paranoid, this might be the time that you might want to call your key spouse or find some help, because this might be something a little more than just the normal coming home. There's no stigma to it. A lot of guys don't want it on their record, especially if they're flyers. But there are ways, such as MFLAC, that it won't be on the record. A few little websites that I've found out about, Daddy Dolls, where you can get a little doll, 2 different sizes with a picture of the spouse on there for little ones. You can get a welcome home banner. Military One Source is wonderful, and then that's the website for Opla. This is the time I usually take questions, but of course, you're not here to ask questions, but you can leave questions in the comment field. I ask that you keep them appropriate. And that's it. Thank you so much for sitting through this. I really hope it was helpful to you. And oh look, there is fireworks in this briefing.